welcome to The Pop. Today we are live again, this time with a special guest, Pastor James McCarroll of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. You're here with Dr. Turan with The Pop. We are here with Pastor James McCarroll. And I want to give a brief bio, but I also love it when my guests actually give their own sort of introduction because they give so much more meatiness to it. And so I'm going to let you do that. But we are going to be talking today about servant leadership and Jesus. So for those that don't know what this is about, we are really going to go into it and we're going to explain what all of this is about, right? But we are going to be talking about Jesus. We can't talk about peace and pursuing peace if we're not talking about Jesus, okay?
Absolutely.
So we have today with us the illustrious Pastor James McCarroll, who is a native of Nashville, Tennessee. So he's joining us from Tennessee. I'm here downtown Los Angeles. And he has truly been blessed to teach and preach at just several venues across the country, as well as even out of the country, international. So those venues may have been conferences, it may have been conventions, revivals, retreats, but ultimately his desire is for those that he ministers to experience a fullness of their Christian possibility. And when we're talking about that, this is actually something that has caused him to approach his ministry with a more holistic approach. And we're always talking about the holistic way to pursue peace, how to move forward from all facets of who we are, mind, body, and spirit, right? So without further ado, Pastor James McCarroll, please welcome to The Pop.
So I want to just say thank you for allowing me to share with you tonight. I'm excited about this conversation and just to get a chance to meet you and meet those that listen to you. There's so many blessings that come in fellowship and cooperative spaces. So I'm excited to see what this synergy will produce for the lives of those that will listen.
Well, I am again looking at what we're talking about in regards to servant leadership.
So you asked me to share a little bit about myself. So
yes.
My name is James McCarroll. I'm a native of Nashville, Tennessee. So one of the few people in the city of Nashville, which is becoming a very transient space, that still lives here. I actually live in the beautiful city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. As you mentioned earlier, I pastor the First Baptist Church here, and I have been blessed to travel all over this country and all over this world, just sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, but also just getting a chance to meet people, getting a chance to engage people and see where they are versus being a person that comes in and becoming kind of what some writers call an extractionist, meaning I just force my culture onto them. I get a chance to hear their stories and get a chance to see how they engage the gospels and how they engage one another. And so I've really just been blessed to be made much richer by the various experience that the Lord has allowed me to have. So the person you see today is kind of this hodgepodge of just a life of just engaging in and kind of pulling from various subcultures throughout the globe. So it's just a blessing to have all of that stuff lead me here tonight to be with Dr. Shanae.
The doc is in the house.
You better know it.
Well, I am truly, and I'm just really excited. I know that I've been on this journey myself, as this is even called The Pop, the Pursuit of Peace. And it's called the Pursuit of Peace because I grew up in the church. My dad is a bishop. My mom's a pastor. And I didn't really get to have my relationship for myself with God until I was maybe getting ready to leave the home. So when it's all said and done, I know that there is a purpose for me. And I don't think that I realized that I had a purpose that would bring us even here until I began to look at this, what I called a series of unfortunate events. It's like, why do things keep happening? And so from that and where we are today with even talking about servant leadership and Jesus, we're at a point where I was realizing the intersection between leadership. As my listeners know, I'm an organizational development psychologist, as well as being a mental health therapist and executive coach. And so when I am supporting people, they don't really understand how, first, that I'm able to be as effective, but also how they become as effective as I am in my leadership model. But it all goes back to servant leadership.
Yes.
Now, I do want to just put it out there for those that don't know what servant leadership is, and then we can just dive right into it as far as your thoughts of its connection to God, So there's a leader, even though servant leadership is really growing in popularity, there is a set leader of this leadership style, and it's Robert Greenleaf. And what I find really interesting, before I give the characteristics that he pointed out as being a servant leader, on the front end of his book, I want to quote what he quoted. And he quoted Proverbs 9:1. And it says, "Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars." And the 7 pillars that he has identified to what cultivates what servant leadership is to him, again, being the front runner of this leadership style, is a person of character who puts people first.
Yes.
They are skilled communicators. They are compassionate collaborators. They have foresight. And they're a systems thinker. And the final, and I think one of the ones that we're going to probably have the most fun with, is that this servant leader leads with a moral authority. So the 7 pillars of leadership that Robert Greenleaf pointed out in his explanation of the foundation of servant leadership are a person of character, someone that puts people first. They are a skilled communicator, compassionate collaborator. They have foresight. They're a systems thinker. And the 7th is they lead with a moral authority. So we're talking about servant leadership.
Yes, ma'am.
And Jesus.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's just get right into it. Tell me something, like your first thought when you hear that.
But while hearing Greenleaf's thing, so here's the first thing I think. The first thing I think is he took notes from Jesus.
Say that again. Wait a minute. Say that again.
He
Robert
took notes.
Greenleaf did what?
He took notes from the leadership model of Jesus.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing. When it comes to leadership, and I love leadership, I'm absolutely just a fan of high quality, top 2% leaders. But one of the things that's clear is that every major leader from the time of Christ until now, every major leader will point back to, whether intentionally, whether verbally, or whether just in their systematic approach, they will point back to some model that Jesus brought to the earth. Okay. Jesus had this model of leadership that was revolutionary, if you will, in his culture.
Okay.
At the time, as you know, a lot of people were borrowing their concepts from the Gentiles around them or the surrounding cultures that they saw. So they saw the Roman leadership model, which was very top down, if you will, very everyone works for me, everyone's under me, if you will. So when Jesus makes this statement in Mark 10, where he says, the Gentiles desire to lord over the people that are under them, but I'm telling you, I'm going to shift the model. The model is the absolute opposite. It's the greatest of you will be your servant. And this is like crazy because this model that he shows us is one that is proven to be successful throughout the ages. This concept of servant leadership, not that there are other models that aren't effective, but when it comes to a level of just mutual respect and mutual love, if you will, and compassion amongst or between leader and follower, I've not seen it more prevalent than in the model where there is servant leadership. It's just a totally different model. And as you said earlier, in most cases, it's relatively foreign because most people think top down. They think, I work to get this position and I want you to be under me. But the best leaders I've ever met are the guys that don't just lead from the top down. They are always attentive and they're always seeing how they can serve the people that work alongside them. So looking at this list, and I hadn't seen this list in a long time. I hadn't read that book in a little while, but I will tell you, there's no piece in here that you don't see Jesus model in the Gospels.
Okay.
And so if you want me, I can break it down, Dr. Shanae, if
please.
you want to.
I was just about to say, please, let's start from the first one.
So when we talk about a person of character, you talk about just the way Jesus honored God. The Bible says we don't have a high priest who can't be touched by the feeling of our infirmity and was tempted just like we were, but without sin. So he begins by modeling this version of what it means to follow God. This is God in the flesh. It's literally the teacher switching roles, sitting in the desk to say, let me show you how to be the student I'm calling you to be. This is God literally modeling human life with God. And so he shows us in this high moral, sinless life what it really looks like to follow God. There's not a better model of leadership than that. I think John Maxwell talks about this person of character and the need to be a person of character that people look up to, people respect. And so there's just this beautiful picture of this in Christ, that wherever he goes, there's just this model of love that draws people to him, that makes people, it almost wows people when they get a chance to meet him and they see his love and see the way he carries himself. The second piece, which is putting people first, you'll always see Jesus putting someone else before himself. He said, I didn't come to be served. I came to serve and give my life a ransom for many. He literally saw his life as an investment of heaven for the people of earth. That's the most powerful concept of leadership, servant leadership you can ever see, where a leader doesn't see his life as one that is to be given unto, but he sees it as a gift of heaven for the people that not only serve alongside him, but he's called to really meet the people whose needs he's called to meet. And so you see Jesus literally laying his life down before the cross, but definitely on the cross for someone else. You can't get a better picture of servant leadership than that. The third one, which is skillful communication. He had this, when Jesus would talk, he was so skilled that if you argued with him, you would almost hate that you started the argument, because people usually ended being mad, trying to stone him, because he was just skillful, like a chess master in communication, just excellent at communication. But then also he spoke with authority. And one thing that's very key when you talk about the skill of communication, there are 4 areas in it. But when you talk about speaking, to speak as one with authority. So it almost garnered this space of inviting people to lead, because there was a certainty. There was an assurance in his dialogue that let people know he's not like shifting in his leadership. He's clear on his vision. He's clear on his expectation, and he's clear on his path. And so that he just spoke, he was just a phenomenal communicator. And then on top of that, now, of course, he was God, so it was kind of unfair You know what I
Right.
mean? He was there when all the languages were made, you know.
Right.
But the other piece is this, and there's a lot of research that speaks to it. He was able to communicate with different people at different levels. The thing I love about Jesus is not only did like the scribes come to him, not only did disciples come to him, not only did sick people come to him, but they would bring their children. And the Bible says that he would take these children and he would put them in his arms and bless them. Watch this. He was so skillful that he could translate in a way that transcended age.
Right.
And when you talk about a skillful leader, they're not waiting on everybody to learn their vernacular.
Right.
A servant leader pays attention to the subcultures of the people around them. Not only the people they directly serve, but the people that may be invited into their space.
Yeah.
And they take time to learn their vernacular so that they're not asking people to come to them first. Right. They're stepping into their worlds first. And Jesus was just masterful at it. And
I want to take a second because you are giving so much. You are giving so much. And I really want people to catch this. One thing that you were explaining when you were talking about the compassion that was there, that is mirrored in a lot of our top leaders here today, is there is a necessity for humility in that, what you said, right?
Yes, yes.
And so as we go along this journey of looking at the crossroads of these 7 pillars, you know, how do they intersect? How do they overlap? It's like you're getting, like, even where you've come so far in these top 3, you know, it's like, well, not only is there a need for humility, but there's also a need for vision. There's a need for a focus and a mission that is shared. You know, you can't lead people anywhere if you don't have them all on the same accord. And
so we're getting to that. That's foresight. And I think that's going to be huge. Yeah, you're dropping dimes. You're dropping dimes.
But you are too. That's why I'm like, this is going to be so great. And this is why, and just for those that are watching, this is why we're going to have a part 2. Just so you know, like, don't get distracted. Take your notes out. I'm like, we're just getting started. We're just 20 minutes in, okay? But I want to even tie something else together. And don't forget your thought. Because you go from humility. You're talking about, okay, we're going to have this discussion about vision, having a shared vision, having a shared mission, right? And then not only did you drop that gem of, wait a minute, this is something that was being taught back in Jesus's day.
Yes.
And it doesn't get old. This is something that we're still wanting people to develop. You know, and while everyone has a choice, we're talking about the one that's most effective, the one that is one that leads with love, one that it stays regardless of the time. And when you said that, it made me think about the time that we're in. We're in a space where we're going through a lot of change. Even though it's been, like 3 months now that we've been dealing with this pandemic, at least overtly aware of it and dealing with it. And we're talking about a lot of organizations, regardless of anyone's belief system, that are really struggling to pull their teams together. There's a lot of discord. There's a lot of dissension. There's a lot of fear. And again, I want to, just so that we can help people really marinate on this, I want to even just look at those first 3 and just say, man, what could you do as a leader right now, knowing all of this?
Yes. So I've got so much. I've got writing. I've got a whole little pad over here just filling up with notes. I'm like chomping at the bit because, again, this is my passion. This is one area I just absolutely love. So let me go back to humility.
Yes.
Paul says to Timothy, lay hands suddenly on no man. And he goes on to say that you shouldn't do this because they may swell up with pride as they get the position. The one thing that leadership requires, and I think is necessary, is leadership is only its most effective when a person has gone through the process of preparation for leadership. One of the great challenges is everyone wants to be a leader tomorrow.
Right.
But there's a great danger in skipping the process that comes before leadership.
Yes.
Or having leadership handed to you in a succession plan that has not been well thought out. And so when you see the evil leaders of Israel, these were guys that didn't go through a process. Mm-hmm. These were guys that were handed a kingdom without being proven first. Mm. And the hardest thing is guys will apply for a job. They'll put their resume out there and they've never really led. And they figure, well, I'll figure it out once I get there. Any leader that's ever gone through the ranks before coming to leadership knows that's a myth. There are some lessons that you learn in the process of becoming a leader that humble you. There's some breaking that has to happen in you before you become a leader. See, if you've never been at the point beneath the leader, where you've seen and heard the stories and seen the emotions of the people that the leader leads, then you'll always lead with a blind eye and a deaf ear to your coworkers. But when you've been in that space, when you sat in that space, when you felt what they felt, and then you go a little bit further up the ladder and you go a little bit further, or maybe you're not on that side of it. Maybe you're leading, but you start with a small thing and you lead. Every phase has a building and a breaking and a building and a breaking. Or sometimes it's a breaking and a building. Yeah. And what it does is it humbles you. The Bible says humility comes before honor. Mm-hmm. And so there has to be something in you that gets humbled before God can trust you with honor. And the worst thing we can do is try to get the honor without garnering the humility needed to properly steward it. Yes. You feel me? And Absolutely. So when we talk about that, what we're seeing right now is a very challenging circumstance. Our context right now is one of those unprecedented spaces. Mm-hmm. And this context is squeezing the life out of leaders. It's squeezing us. It's almost like a wine press or an olive press, where it's squeezing us to see what's really in us. Right. And when I tell you, and you work with guys, we're really struggling because everything's uncertain. Yes. From being a person that builds systems, there has to be some bedrock. There has to be some consistency. There has to be some foundation. And so here's the thing. And man, this is so good. I wish I would just grab the microphone and just preach. The powerful piece is this. If you don't have God, not church, God, right, in this space, everything else is sand right now. And so the frustrating piece is we're trying to we're trying to figure out how to build systems on sand. Yeah. And the only consistent thing we have right now is that God is still in control, and God is. Despite the pandemic, the sun has gone up every morning, right, gone down every evening. And so what we have to do is now build on eternal realities. And it's a different model of leadership. And so go ahead.
No, I really want you to dig a little bit more into that piece. Okay. Because I don't want to lose anybody again, and this is definitely just coming to me. I don't want to lose anybody by thinking that, okay, well, I don't know what I believe. Oh, this is my spiritual belief. I want to bring it back into context of understanding something that is tried and true.
Okay.
Is if we know, because we do know, so I'm being facetious here. If we know that Jesus was performing, and the embodiment and the blueprint if we can say it that way, the blueprint to effective, sustainable, and unwavering leadership.
Yes.
Why wouldn't we go back to the blueprint?
Well, we're in a postmodern age, so the blueprint is relative now. Some would argue that we're in a postmodern age, which means that the blueprint, if it's a blueprint, is whatever it is or isn't based on whatever you think it should be or shouldn't be. And so everything's so relative again that we go back to this place where we're waiting on our own relativism to give us answers instead of going to that which will survive heaven and earth. Right. When we talk about Jesus's model, there's one scripture that sticks out to me where he says, "Foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." The principle has nothing to do with a comfortable place to sleep.
No.
It has everything to do with an external space. Jesus built the entire ministry on vision. Here it is. This is going to mess you up. I mentioned building it on eternal things. Yeah. And so many people are like, "What you talking about, man? Talking about eternity?" Right. I'm not saying eternity. I'm saying spiritual things. Y'all ready? I hope you're ready. Dr. Shani, I hope you're ready. Y'all invited me, so I'm going to give it like, I'm going to drop it like it is.
Please.
So there are two things that God will always pay attention to, and they transcend stuff. You ready? The first one is an eternal and invisible calling. So before you're formed in your mother's womb, God says, "Okay, this is what I built you to do in the earth." And then he ordains you before you leave your mother's womb to do that. So if your job is to be a healer, then you're a healer in the earth. Right. Before you get a degree, before you get a building, before you get an office, before you get a title, before you get even a client, you're a healer.
You're talking about
that's purpose. Eternal. Yeah, that's purpose. But purpose. It's God's plan for you. It's clearly his plan. And so when you submit to his plan, you're saying, "Okay, I'm sent here to be a healer. Whether I have a building or not, I'm a healer. Whether I get a degree or not, I'm a healer. This is my eternal purpose." Got that? So if they take my title, they can never rob me of my eternal purpose. If they take my mobility, if I become a paraplegic, I still have that eternal purpose on me.
That makes me think of, and I'm sure you've read this, that book that's called, and I always recommend it, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge.
I'm not.
Because it has nothing to do with, again, the title. That's a role. That's something tangible, right? That's a position description. That isn't purpose. That's not your internal mojo. Like what is like you're supposed to do. That's not it.
Exactly. So you're exactly right. And so the title is for people that are looking for a person. It helps. It's a label, if you will. It's when you walk into a room with 50 people, it's okay. That's the pastor. Okay. That's the president. Okay. That's the architect. Okay. So they don't have to go person by person. The title just helps those that we're called to serve quickly identify us.
Right.
So that's why you have to be very careful grabbing a title when you haven't discovered your purpose. It's a little rough. It's a little rough. I'm sorry. That was me. So
wait a minute.
So the first eternal element is the eternal element of your purpose. It's your calling. It's your anointing, whatever language you want to use. The second eternal element is fruitfulness. Period. It's what you actually produce based on who you are. So fruitfulness doesn't require anything but the assignment being on your life and a willingness to effectively steward the calling that's on you to the extent that you give heaven something to show for it.
Right.
So all fruit is fruit is the outcome of you being properly surrendered to God and yielded to God. So when God says do, you do. And what gets done in the life of the person to whom you do it or for whom you do it is the outcome. So the question is, do you know your purpose? And are you doing what God said do with based on who he made you to be? Right. And then what is the tangible proof of that or fruit from that? So those two things don't require a building. Right. Those two things, you ready for this? Don't really even require money.
Right.
Now you can do it. Money enhances it. Buildings help, kind of structure some pieces of it. Right, but if you take away all of the buildings, have you lost those two things? No.
And see, that's a perspective that is necessary. It's absolutely necessary. And I love the fact that you took it into like a little deep dive into, yes, we're talking about servant leadership. Mm-hmm. Yes, we're talking about Jesus, but what does it even all have to do with you? To give yourself a self-assessment, so to speak. Because if you want to, and this is something that I highlight in my practice as far as teaching people the servant leadership model, But the point of it is when you are literally unsure of who you are and whose you are, it's hard for you to really navigate because then you're trying to show up full speed ahead, 100% authentic in something that you're not even meant to be in, but someone put you in it because of the role, the money, the clout, the authority, all these other things. And again, with the road that you took us on and just backtracking a minute and said, wait a minute, before you even consider the servant leadership model and what Jesus has to do with it, have you considered what you're doing and what your purpose is and how it ties into the entire plan?
Yes, exactly. And so servant leadership, Jesus served on three levels. He served God first. You'll see this in John 4:34, where Jesus says, my meat is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish the work.
Right.
He never had his own agenda, ever. Right. He only had the agenda to which he was submitted, and that was the agenda of God. The second level was to serve the people around you. He said, the greatest of you will be your servant. So you serve your co-laborers. You serve your partners. So first you serve God's plan. Secondly, you serve you serve your partners. And then thirdly, you serve the people of God. He said, I gave my life to be a ransom for many. That here's the thing. True servant leadership happens when you become invisible.
Tell me more about that, though. Wait a minute.
So literally, people don't see you. They see God's agenda on you. Now hear what I'm saying. Your personal, and not that you're going to be totally remiss of personal desires, but what I'm saying is your ultimate plan in this life is hidden in the plan of God. And so the reason you breathe is to fulfill what God sent you to do. And so your soul knows peace when your soul is in alignment with his purpose. But I'll just keep going. I want to hit these top three again, because the first part of leadership, servant leadership, goes back to character. And that question is, are you exhibiting a character that people feel they can emulate, model, or cause them to become a higher and better version of themselves? So when you talk about how you present yourself as a leader, servant leadership begins with thinking through the model and the version of self that needs to be presented so that people see the heart that they desire to have, or they should desire to have. You should literally set the bar, or become the lid, if you will, or become the benchmark for those that work alongside you. Does it mean you'll be perfect? Absolutely not. But what it does mean is that you will be committed to making sure that you present a character that is not only honorable and not only respectable, but it's a character that makes people see it and look within and challenge themselves about who they are and where they are. And I think, I don't know if we're going to get out of the top 3 tonight, Doc. I don't know if we're going to get out. We're talking about character.
And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Let's talk about how
we're doing part 2.
Yeah, part 2 is going to be crazy. I hope y'all ready. But we just talked about character and how part of servant leadership is that you exhibit a character that calls people to a higher version of themselves and a better version of themselves. A character that challenges them when they see it. I don't know who wrote it. I have a ton of books on leadership. I don't know who wrote it, but someone just talked about how when you're amongst the people, it should just really call them to see and look within and see where they can make adjustments. And so there should be something about you, whether it's the moral piece, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but just the demeanor, the disposition, the ability to handle conflict, the ability to have peace and composure in very challenging moments.
Right.
All of those pieces and parts of character challenge people. When they look at how they go off from their wives, they should be able to see something in the leadership that you bring that make them lead their own lives at a higher level. So that's all of us sharing.
Right. And I know that something that came up for me with even that piece, as far as you don't see the leader, right? You don't see the leader. You see, for one, the movement. You see the movement. You see the impact. And you see the direction without it needing to be hammered down. Like it's truly living it out on purpose.
Yeah.
And something that I know that I've seen people do just by default is they try to work it. They try to make it a certain way. They try to make it look a certain way. And they end up turning their wheels ultimately for nothing. You know, it's they are just operating in their own strength and their own merit.
Yes.
And it makes it difficult for them. And it's that question mark. Well, what am I doing different? What am I doing wrong? What am I missing? But you are actually telling us where it starts and how you can still find yourself into the space of being a servant leader.
Yes. Yes. So even as a servant leader, you're always thinking of other in every space. You're always thinking of those, whether it's God, whether it's those working alongside you or the people that you're called to serve. And so one of the challenges with leadership is that it's people will become who you are. And in some cases, they will try to mimic what you do. So they will put on what you do, but they'll become who you are.
Wow.
And that's the challenge of leadership, because, we can front, but part of that process of becoming a leader is to break some things off of you.
Yeah.
You can only front so long. Like, it's hard, man. Leadership will always have that moment.
Yeah.
Where before God can birth you to the next level of leadership, he's going to put you into something that will break you.
Yeah.
And the challenge is when you leapfrog processes or when you skip processes, you don't always survive the breaking in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Because every level has a breaking. And so if you jump into that big role, like say, for instance, you have a 15 member company and all of a sudden now you have a company with 15 employee company. Now you jump into a company with 30,000 employees.
Right.
Just the breaking of it. You're not ready for that. And that's where you see people have nervous breakdowns. They commit suicide. They go through a lot of different personal challenges in their home with their children because leadership squeezes you. And so inevitably you want to make sure you've gone through enough squeezings before you get to that point so that you can survive it. And it squeezes you to the degree that you have to become a different person.
Yeah.
I just said something. I need to write that down myself.
You did.
Like,
you need to.
It squeezes you until your being changes.
Right. But that goes back to what you were saying before, as far as people, again, I don't want people to think we're going off on a tangent because it's all giving you the foundations to servant leadership.
Yes.
One of the key pieces, not only is it looking to God for your help, looking to God for your direction, because some people, just to take a little diversion on that piece, some people, they'll say, oh, I just got an unction, or I just got a feeling to do X, Y, and Z. And it worked. I didn't prepare for it. I used to say all the time, if I remembered an exam, I knew I was going to fail. If I blanked out, I knew it was God working through me. like if I'm so prepared that so it's like, and I'm bringing that up to say the foundation first, going to God. You want to be a true servant leader? Because again, it's being put out there just like emotional intelligence. It's the flavor, right? It sounds good. It looks good, but it's a reason why it sounds and looks good.
Yes.
Right. You're tapping into something that is not of you. Right. Yes. And you're training yourself to operate in that gift. So when you are, as a servant leader, going to God first, and then you're going to God, but then allowing yourself to be groomed.
Yes.
Into your position, and into your position, I should correct myself, into your purpose. Because when it's all said and done, you can't be automatically a person of character.
Yes.
Because, there's a lot of characters out there. We're not just talking about, you can be a Homer. You can be that. You can be another character on some slapstick show. But we're talking about a servant leader that has character, that is going to give you the results. Someone that puts people first, that's going to give you the results. And you are a skilled communicator because of the source. Like, it all goes hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, right?
Yes.
So when you are getting to that point of building the character that is required of a servant leader, you have to grow. You have to be in that darkness for a little bit. You can't be in the limelight the whole time. So even for those that are getting anxious, what does the Bible say about being anxious? Again, this is the Pursuit of Peace podcast, right? So don't be anxious for anything. But know that you are being groomed. You are being, as you said, squeezed, and I like the fact that you said squeeze, because grooming is nice. It's nice. It's a nice word. It makes you feel good. Like, okay, this is good. But when you're squeezed, you understand that there's some things that have to be broken off of you. And sometimes, for even if we go to the example that we've brought up a couple of times during this taping, is it is necessary for you to be able to have humility.
Yes.
And in order to be humble, you have to go through some things, because otherwise it's going to be a challenge for you to be able to put people first. Right?
Exactly right. Yeah. And see, servant leadership, servanthood is not homogenous. It's different in every phase and in every stage. So servanthood in a space that has a small population is one thing. Servanthood in a space that has a much larger populace is a different thing. So when you talk about Jesus, even with Jesus, the Bible says Jesus increased in wisdom and knowledge. Yes. God himself in the flesh increased in wisdom and knowledge. Before, think about this, he didn't start the ministry until he was 30 years old. So you have this 18-year window of preparation for a 3-year ministry. And so when you think about the version of leadership, so when I talk about that, and I agree, it's a space where when we talk about serving God has levels of growth. At some points you'll fight to make your will God's will, and then the more you grow, the more you begin to make God's will your will. But there are stages to that.
Yes,
working alongside other people. when you start serving, you may deal with just your friends. And as time goes on, God can introduce new people. And then he introduces new people with attitudes. Then he introduces new people that are antagonistic. And at every stage, you have to learn to serve in a different way. And then when it comes to the people you're called to serve, sometimes you get a good batch. Sometimes you get people that all love you and they're all sweet and they're all nice. Then sometimes you get a Moses batch where they like, look, we prefer to be slaves. We don't want to be out here in the wilderness, eating this food. The name manna literally meant, what is it? They were eating something they didn't even know what it was. So you get that type of thing. So every stage has that growth. I think about even for years, I was a banquet server. I'll never forget, near the middle of college, I started working banquets. And I used to work these small banquets in Vanderbilt's Stadium Club. So right before the high rollers, the big donors would go to the basketball game, they would come and have this meal. And so I would serve there. It was about maybe 150 to 200 people, but it prepared me. And I learned how to serve in that small space under a guy named Tony. And Tony showed me how to manage 200 people. But what he didn't know, he was preparing me to walk into a room at Opryland Hotel with 2,000 people.
Right.
Had I not learned service at that level, I would have been ill prepared for service at the next level. So the servanthood, though they were similar in roles, they were at different levels and on different levels. Right. And so you have to go through that process. Right. And there, again, as was said, this humility piece is so big. We should probably do an entire session just on humility and servant leadership.
Yes.
The biggest challenge is God has to uproot some things out of our hearts. Because when we look at leadership, we initially think title, we initially think position, we initially think pay, we initially think influence, and God has to spend time uprooting that a little bit at a time. And the more he uproots, the more he can entrust us with a great biblical example. And this is my long Baptist preacher version of an answer. Is the model of David. Mm-hmm. So David gets anointed as a boy, but does not take the appointment until he sees he's ready after the death of his predecessor. Now, David has the calling, but what he does first is he serves the king.
Yeah.
And then he served this small band of guys, and they grow, and he learns leadership there. Mm-hmm. He learns what it means to be valiant. He learns to walk with these guys. And even when the king dies, they come and they try to put the crown on him. And he says, no, not like this. He celebrates the legacy of his predecessor. And he doesn't take the crown until the previous king is buried. Watch this. He has the anointing, but refuses to get the crown until the entire process of his predecessor is over. So he understands the respect that is to come with leadership. And so you have this model of servant leadership. And he didn't see himself becoming a leader until he had faithfully served his predecessor.
Right.
He said, I'm not going to go ahead.
I was just going to say, and something else that comes out of that I love, because it is it's so meaty. It's so many layers to this, because something, as you were speaking, I was envisioning the impact. Yeah. Now, when we're transitioning from one leader to another, because I know that some people are like, it's a struggle because they may have had a certain level of preparation, right? They get into the position and there's the question mark of how am I going to be received when there's a transition in leadership. Mm-hmm. And by honoring those that served before them, regardless of whether they were a servant leader or not, but honoring them, respecting their space and the role that they had.
Yes.
How much more respect and room for acceptance are you going to get from those that see this?
Yes.
They're going to respect you even more for that. So we're talking about every step that you take, you're ultimately taking multiple steps in that servant leadership role, because you are impacting on so many levels, which is why servant leadership works and is so impactful. Because when you do one thing, you could possibly be impacting ripples, multiple things that are going to help you succeed, right?
Yes, you're exactly right. Because people don't know new leaders.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's kind of like what some psychologists argue with mothers and fathers, and how a father is respected through the mother in some cases. Or if a person meets a person with children, they only know them based upon how they engage the one they respect. And so your first level of respect will always come based upon how you treat your predecessor. Now, here's other piece. You just dropped it so many times. I love this. We should do this every week for like.
That's what I'm like.
Because we're not going to get out of humility.
Right.
But it's this concept of servant and servant leadership. This is why I say it becomes invisible.
Yeah.
It's because that servant leader simply becomes the vessel for God's move. And so they only ask the question, Lord, where do you have me to serve? Who do you have me to serve? And how do you have me to serve? So in David's case, he's saying, okay, I get to serve Saul again. He's dead, but Lord, you're calling me to serve him with the hands you've given me. And so what we understand, oh gosh, heavy, is that I'm a person. Gosh, this is so heavy. I'm a person that's wrapped in purpose. And
Wait a minute. First of all, we're gonna wait. This is what's so amazing about this. We are at the end of our time for this first. We are at the end of our time for this first go round. But let me tell you. This isn't over.
Let me just say this, like 5 seconds.
Yes, please.
I'm a person wrapped in purpose. And the only reason my soul is in the earth is to make sure God's purpose comes to pass. And when that purpose is over, my soul goes back to him. I'm done.
So what you just ended us on was servant leadership is purpose-driven leadership. Did you just say that?
I'm only here to steward the purpose he put on me.
There you have it, folks. Look, listen. We may have had our little technical issues, and it is what it is. We're going to fix this. We're going to pull it together, and I'm putting it out there. And I'm going to write it down. He said, speak it into existence. I'm going to get some technical support. And we are going to get this, but we are not going to lose sight because we can't. It's right in front of us. This is servant leadership living. How about that? This is servant leadership living.
I love it.
We are not going to lose not one beat by saying, stay tuned to session 2, part 2 of servant leadership. And why we're talking about Jesus, it's a reason. And for those that were able to get through all of this and you stayed with us, we thank you. And before we go, I want to, and I always do this, I want to give Pastor McCarroll an opportunity to share with us how can people get in touch with you if they need to get in touch with you. And if you have anything coming up, please share so that people can join you. Please tell our listeners how they can reach you.
Okay, so there are a couple of ways. One, of course, Instagram. You can go to Pastor JMac at Pastor JMC on Instagram. You can DM me there. Also, you can go on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, or you can like the jamesmccarroll.org page. That is a space where you can go in. You can leave messages. I'll respond to that. If you need an email, you can send an email to preach, M as in Mary, AC @gmail.com. Those 3 ways you can get in contact with me, and I'll do my best to get back with you.
And is there anything coming up? I mean, I know that if there's those that are, in the vicinity or not, thankfully.
Yeah. So we have a couple of things. One, I would encourage you. So every Wednesday night at 8:30 Central Standard Time, I do what we call the Wednesday night impact check-in. This is where we kind of go through a series of questions just to make you think about how you're producing and whether or not you're being as productive as God has called you to be every week. Monday morning motivations, as soon as you get on Instagram, if you like it, you'll see, or if you follow me, you'll get those on Instagram. You'll see that. And then I want to just announce this. I have a project, a music project we've been working on, literally called The Evolution of Peace. So it is so timely. It will come out late August, Lord willing.
Yes.
And it's actually designed to deal with people that wrestle with anxiety, PTSD, ACEs, all of that stuff, frustration, crazy folk. It's designed to help deal with all of that. But it's a music project that is absolutely amazing. And so that will be out a little bit later this year. The next book will be coming out. I'll hold that to part 2 and share with you about what that's going to be then. So we're just excited.
Yes.
All of the engagements, the conferences, I'll do some of that, but everything pretty much has been canceled this year due to COVID. Yeah. So Facebook, Instagram, that's where it is right now.
Yes. And if there's anything else coming up that you didn't get a chance to think of, we will be here again with The Pop next Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right? And know this, if you have any questions, this is going to be on playback. I'm going to get this edited. I do my own editing for now. So anybody listening, we'll edit this. It will be on The Pop, and that is The Pop podcast by Dr. Turan. And The Pop, if you didn't know, is for The Pursuit of Peace podcast. Okay. Wherever you look at your podcast, or listen to your podcast, that's where I am, wherever you want to go. So if you need anything, you can also reach me as usual at www.officialspconsultinggroup.com. Okay. So till next time, y'all better come with your notebooks. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, okay? So we will be back. Thanks again, Pastor McCarroll. And I can't wait to have you again next Friday. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.